All right, shall we begin? The upcoming generations seem even more normalized to porn, etc. What can we do to shift normalization away from pornification? Good question.
To shift culture away from pornification. That's a tall order. There's been such, our children are seeing it from very young ages. So I think this is going to be really a major challenge. There's a few things that we could start on. I'll start on. One is with the kids in our own circle of influence, whether it's your brothers and sisters, or if you have children yourself, or if you have grandkids. What are you doing to prepare them for when they see pornography? Because it's not a matter of if, it's when. And if they have seen pornography, are you able to engage with them? Like, are you having conversations with them now about the kind of content that they're seeing, or the kinds of things that are happening at school? It's really important to be able to cultivate these open conversations that they feel that they can come to you when they see something that they're upset about or they're confused, that they know that that you're not going to just react and get angry and have an overreaction about it, that they can actually come to you as a confidant or expect a calm discussion about it. So starting those conversations. I think there could be a lot more done in schools to create protective environments. One of the things that we talk about a lot at NACOSI, at the National Center on Sexual Exploitation, is the issue of devices that are being handed out in schools. Okay, these devices are typically unfiltered. They're the administrators, or there might be filters at the school, but once the devices go off of the school property, the device itself doesn't have protective filters once it goes outside certain bounds of the school property. So it's very important that schools be very proactive in terms of creating these, just randomly giving out these devices without they're just opening up the entire world to them of all kinds of sinister material when you give out devices without filters. Okay, so that's schools. I think there needs to be a lot more done on digital citizenship and how to relate with others online and how to have discourses, and to not just attack and bully people, or and to teach kids about this. There's a whole new framework that's being developed called porn critical analysis. A lot of that's been pioneered by Liz Walker, who is an academic down from Australia. I have to say the Australians are really leading the way a lot in kind of recognizing this problem at a national level and really having a lot of government resources put into combating it. And they've just launched a new curriculum for kids that Liz Walker helped develop. I think it's something called Umbrella. I just learned about it this week. It's a really awesome thing. So those are just some ideas. There is no silver bullet here. There is none. But to the extent that we're all using our own circles of influence, or creating protective environments around those that we have the ability to do that, and then encouraging, talking to our friends, talking to other people, being active, taking advantage of social media to promote books and resources and to get more information out. I know I'm constantly talking about it to my people, to my brothers and sisters at my church. I give people books. Who have kids, I just try to be proactive in those ways.
I just have one quick thing to offer, and this is just an article I read recently, but I saw, I think it was last year, Sweden had actually created a law that you are not allowed to advertise anything racist or exploitive. That's novel, so that was my thought.
Prevention, there's so much information about attachment, parent-child attachment. Well, it continues in every stage, and parents need to know they need to keep attached, keep having, not just talk about pornography, but every day, how are you doing? Be open to really listening to your kids so that when you can tell when there's something going on that they feel uncomfortable, but so keep keep that connection going always. Parents are the key. There's a great book, Hold On to Your Kids, by I think Gordon Neufeld, that I really suggest.
Many of you have probably heard of Fight the New. How many of you have heard of Fight the New Drug, the website? Okay, if you haven't, you should check them out. Clay Olson's a good friend of mine. He's the founder and CEO of Fight the New Drug. If you've ever seen those shirts that say "Porn Kills Love," basically that's a research-based statement with 3 words on a T-shirt. It's not a shaming phrase; it's just a statement of truth. What Fight the New Drug is trying to do, and many other organizations, is similar to what happened with the tobacco movement. It used to be that doctors prescribed tobacco to calm your nerves, and they would say, "This is the brand I recommend." It would be on a billboard. That would be unheard of. It'd be laughable. But what happened is we kept making the case with good, using stories, facts, research. There was a cultural change, and then laws started to follow that. Sometimes you start with the laws and the other way around, but so good can be done that way. And I see a similar tide turning slowly but surely with the anti-porn movement as we saw with the tobacco. And if any of you smoke in here, I'm not trying to demean you because I have a brother who smokes. It doesn't mean you're a lesser person. But we do know now we can have this conversation about the harms of it without shaming somebody. At least somebody's an informed voter on their choices. Does that make sense? And most people are not informed when it comes to pornography. So, and of course, I'm always going to have to say, this has to begin with parents teaching their children. If you don't understand what true intimacy looks like, pornography won't make any sense. The dangers of pornography won't make sense. If there is no light to contrast the dark, you will accept the darkness as light. So,
again, I think we have to look not only in our families, but what our families are dealing with, what they're watching. I very much would like to see us, I don't know if the word is educate, the community that deals with motion pictures and entertainment, because I have watched comedy shows on which pornography was just lifted high. Oh yeah, I did this and I watched, and I was quite shocked because they were mainline people. So we have to look as parents, as grandparents, as people, young people, we have to start looking at educating those folks who are actually in the industry to turn out things that are not pornographically based. I should not expect that my child will watch porn because porn is what's out there and everybody does it. So that's a mentality I think we have to get out of, and we can help in that.
Okay, the next question is, what justification is used for decriminalization of the business of prostitution?
So the justification, I'm assuming we're taking this from the mindset of the proponents to advocate for decriminalization, legalization, that type of thing. So the arguments that I'm mostly familiar with are that it's women's empowerment, it's a form of feminism, and it's a form of choice for women to have the right to say and do what they want with their own body. And so the irony of that is the least empowering thing for the person being sold. It is the most empowering thing for the person buying the rights to that person. I read a really good op-ed one time by a woman who went into prostitution as a form of a sexual expression, and she wanted to, go into it for that. And after a period of time, she realized it's far, far from it. She's simply there as a vessel for his expression, and for him to be able to do whatever he wanted to with her. And she realized just how disempowering it is. It is not about what she chooses, it's about what he chooses. And so those are some of the main arguments that I've heard to rationalize it.
Yeah, that's the big one. That's the overarching one, that this is a form of empowerment for women. But I think one of the things that you were kind of already saying that gets lost in this conversation is that when you're purchased, the person who's buying you really is buying temporary total control of that individual, and they expect complete sexual satisfaction. Right, so if she doesn't live up to whatever standard he has in mind, he gets highly annoyed because he's purchased something. So he has this consumer mentality, like I bought this, I paid for it, I want it, So the idea that this is empowering, I just find it's such an irony that they flip. I mean, this is what happens a lot. The truth gets completely flipped upside down and sold as, repackaged as this, you know, oh, it's glamorous, it's empowering, this is wonderful, and it's the exact opposite of those things. So that's one of the most common arguments. Another one is that, and we talked about this some in the breakout, but I hear this frequently. There are two I hear a lot. One is that prostitution is sort of the social solution for poverty. Okay, so if you're poor, that's just too bad. And so, well, we've got this backup plan. You can prostitute. Does that sound great, ladies?
No.
Yeah. Oh, you know, you're stressed about feeding your kids or paying the rent, or you've got a sick kid. Oh, well, you know, we can line up some buyers for you. That's truly the mentality. It's as if prostitution is some sort of social security substitute. That, well, you know, we can't deal with these, and it's really also, I think it's very dystopian. I think it's very just sort of this passive acceptance of all these really innate, issues of that marginalize and vulnerable, don't make people vulnerable. It's just accepting of those and say, well, too bad, it's just your fate, you get to prostitute. So that's a common one. And then the other really common one is, well, that the arrest of people in prostitution is trauma. Okay, inflicts trauma. If you arrest a person who's in prostitution, they're so traumatized by being arrested and taken to jail, and the police abuse them. Okay, so now I totally agree that there are many instances in where there are law enforcement officials who take advantage of these people, who do sexually exploit them, and that I don't deny that I'm sure being arrested and put in jail is a traumatizing experience, especially when it happens on a serial basis, because there's so much emphasis on arresting the people who are being sold as opposed to the people who buy them. But be that as it may, the bulk of the trauma of prostitution isn't in being arrested, it's in the people who buy you, okay? Or the people who are trafficking you. This is where the bulk of the harm arises from, and full decriminalization actually just winks at that. It assents to that. So those are some of the really common ones.
There was a ballot initiative in Lyon County to ban legal prostitution there, and so some other arguments came up during that time that caught my attention as well. And it's interesting because I think we tend to just not critically think around things that have always been around. We've had legalized prostitution in Nevada for 48 years, so I think we have generations now raised to not even consider the issue. And so one of the arguments I've often heard was, but it's going to be around forever, so you might as well legalize it. It'll always exist. And it's interesting because we don't base that rationale for any law. Murder's going to be here forever, so why don't we just legalize it? Right? Yeah. So that's just not how you create laws. And then the other one is, you can't legislate morality. And again, you actually do. All the time. Hence the previous example. We all agree, socially, murder is not something we want as humans to do to one another. So we create these boundaries within behavior and how we believe we should act towards one another. That is our legal system. That is what we do all the time. But for some reason and I think it happened with legislation of marijuana, that we started to use that language of marijuana onto human beings. And they're trying to get some mileage with that. And unfortunately, there's some traction to it. But you cannot compare what is being done to a person's body and psyche and spirit to a plant. You just can't, and you can't have the same rationale to work. And so those are some of the other ones that I've heard.
Okay, I skipped one question. This is our last question. Okay, what role the
Sorry,
Yeah.
5 more minutes.
Okay, fine. What has happened to our culture? Why has there been such an increase in sexual predation?
Why don't you just answer the question, why Katie Taylor is so cool?
How can I be like Kelly Teo?
What has happened to our culture? Why has there been such a high increase in sexual predation? As I've said, we have been training in the media for a long time. Things that were maybe even 10, 20 years ago. As I said, I talked about the former Pope Benedict speaking out recently, a few days ago, in which he said things that a few years ago we would have been horrified to even think of are now considered the norm. So we have allowed small things to creep in. It's like rot on an apple. We've let it happen. And if you leave the apple in the barrel long enough, everything spoils. So we have not been the guardians of our culture. We have been so anxious to be liked, especially since the sexual revolution in the 60s, that we have not paid attention to what was going on around us. And as a result, we look up one day and realize that we are living in hell. What has happened to us becomes a big question. But like everything else, morality has to be monitored.
I guess I agree very much with this idea of this letting things seep in, and I think it's been happening for decades. We had a normalization of pornography, which really gained momentum in the 50s, and there was pushback, but and the organization I work with now is very much involved in that pushback against the normalization of pornography. But what I think really changed everything in that aspect of the conversation is the internet. Because now the way that this is just distributed is it's so accessible. It's not relegated to the red light district or the adult bookstore. We carry it around the XXX store in our back pockets. It's like a couple of clicks away. So there's just this incredible accessibility, and there's also, I think there's been a coarsening of culture that's happened as you had generations of men growing up using pornography, that it was sort of, when you use porn, it changes, I think porn users change culture, right? They're culture shapers. So if you're growing up using this material, it's coarsening your worldview, and then you go on to become a teacher, a judge, a journalist, a movie producer. That view is going to seep out into things that you do, the stories that you tell, the way you coach your kids, the way you produce movies. That's going to come out. And I think that's part of the reason we have this culture. And now people are, I also think just our widespread acceptance of entertainment. We want to be entertained, and we've let so much stuff come into us this way through our acceptance of stuff that we're entertained by violence and sex and in movies. I'm not even talking about porn. I'm just talking about run-of-the-mill shows that people view. So I think all this has really served to coarsen culture to this extreme time. Oh, all right, time's up.